right, you bunch of yahoos, strap yourselves in for another episode of Dan and Don's Toxic Masculinity.
In other words, shut up, sit up, and pay attention. And welcome back to another exciting episode of Toxic Masculinity, where I've got my co-host, the hostess with the mostest, the mustachioed one, the one and only, the Predator, Don Frye.
Hey, baby.
And Don is down in the Sierra Vista / Tucson area right now, and Arizona, and I am still up here in Howell, Michigan. But our guest here is actually back in the state of New York, out on, I think, one of the islands there. I don't know how specific we'll get here right now with this, but we have a New Yorker here right now that's going to be on the line. But we have Seth Turner, who is actually the president of the International Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame. So we're going to be talking about a lot of professional wrestling stuff. We're going to be talking about this incredible museum that just opened up just a few weeks back, I think maybe a little over a month or so back, and we'll be talking about that and all kinds of stuff that's professional wrestling related and whatever else that's that we can come up and sling at people if we happen to offend, defend anyone and everyone that we so desire.
You know, I'm not used to people complimenting, and that it's so difficult. That's why I told you openly that I didn't enjoy the event while I was the one hosting it, and then after the event, all you do is get the opinions of individuals shared with you, and even though you know it went well, like why do I dismiss the positive? And by the way, not that I whine about the negative, I take that negative and I turn it into the fuel to do better and to do more. But why the fuck do I let that drive me crazy, you know?
Well, let me bring Mr. Frye in here for a moment. Okay, Don.
Yes, sir.
How often do I compliment people on a job well done?
I don't know if I've ever heard you do that, sir.
Well, see, there you go. I'm usually a pretty tough customer on a lot of different things there. So it's you didn't let me down there, Don, whatsoever. I actually thought it was going to be a little bit more cantankerous there, but that's all right. You know, you didn't let me down on that.
The old fat brother cooks biscuits down the road, you know.
But no,
true story. I spent a good part of this afternoon watching Don Frye highlights. True story. When you told me, Dan, that we were going to do this podcast, I said, you know, let me take a walk down memory lane.
See who the fuck Don Frye is, huh?
No, I remembered it distinctly, but man, it's what I told Dan when I met him back in the 90s. I so distinctly remember when UFC was coming up. We may or may not have had one of those black boxes that allowed you to get all of the pay-per-views and things like that. But that time frame, the world changed based on what you guys had done. And I said that to Dan and same to you, Don, because people have to go back and remember. Maybe in the 80s or 90s, if you got in a fight in a bar or something, people would maybe punch each other in the nose or something, but nobody knew about grappling or, I won't go into the Brazilian jiu-jitsu or whatever you want to talk about, but when that UFC came on TV, it was groundbreaking. You know, you'd never seen anything like that anywhere. You know, what was there? Boxing, which you knew was fixed because you were sick of watching Don King. You know, Tyson was great, but nobody could fight him. So, he bit Evander Holyfield's ear. There was nothing to watch. Pro wrestling, you knew what that was. Then came mixed martial arts. What the hell is this? That was so groundbreaking at that time. Now people are in a world where it's just been around. But you got to go back to that mid-1990s and what the UFC was from that period to 2000, man, it was. You guys shook up the world.
Well, it was different, yeah. To tell you what, the Gracie's changed, changed martial arts from what everybody knew, because it went from stand up to the ground skills, groundwork, you know, and the Waza, and it just shook everything up. Yeah.
And I told Dan, I distinctly remember when he had walked into the octagon and started giving suplexes. And again, we were like, what the hell is this? You landed like 4 or 5 suplexes on the guy with long blonde hair right away. And we're in our fraternity house in upstate New York. We fucking erupted. The room I was in erupted when that happened.
Well, see, again, I don't know if I told you over the course of that weekend, but I always say that my first profession was, as of the 1992 Olympics, I jumped into professional wrestling training. That was my first profession. And then when in the NW 94, that's when the Ultimate Fighting Championship, actually technically December 1993, but I always just simply say, well, but 1994, you know, I became aware of it during that time frame, and that was my first time being involved with it, because like the internet and pay-per-views was not as prevalent as it is today. I was living in little Coldwater, Michigan, and you know, we weren't going to get pay-per-views. You had to be over Detroit area, up in the Lansing area, up in you know, Bay City. You had to be something bigger. But now today you can watch it right on the comfort of your own cell phone now, and watch different types of pay-per-view. So, you know, technology has gone a long ways to really help out, you know, the notoriety for anything and everything.
You know, while I got you guys too, let's also go back and talk about the tournament style that you had to go through, which is very different than now in the modern era, where they're showing up and having one match. In order for you guys to go through, you were fighting 4 or 5 fights a night. So you had to have that endurance.
Well, Seth needs to elaborate a little bit more on that. Back, the predecessor to mixed martial arts was NHB, which stood for No Holds Barred. Mixed martial arts, the product of mixed martial arts now currently has either 47 or 49 rules to it. Back in the No Holds Barred era, it had 2 rules: no biting, no eye gouging, and even then,
those more guidelines.
They were not grounds for disqualification. Were they, Don?
No.
No.
Stop that.
Yeah, it's like okay, you know, slap your hand. Okay, give him his eyeball back, and don't do that again. Yeah, and again, I say that kind of kidly, but and yet there was a match where one gentleman ended up getting his eye raked and eventually losing eyesight in that eye itself, and there was no repercussion to the athlete, because like I said, those were the rules that people abided to. I mean, I still remember signing that contract and reading that little fine print at the bottom going, in the event of your accidental death. I'm thinking, gee, he can't bite me. He can't stick his finger in his eye. There's a whole lot of other ways you can take your death, your life, without ever violating those 2 rules there. So again, sometimes you have to keep reminding people that there was a different time era. But the thing I guess I was really trying to go to, and I really want to kind of pose this to Don, because how many of today's athletes, especially these young mixed martial artists, could go to an event? Okay, you know that you are one of these 8 participants, because in the beginning you're one of 8, but you only found out who the other 7 men, because women weren't competing until like the early 2000s. And I go, you saw the other 7 men on a Friday night press conference, because again, there's no weight class. You're at a press conference, and the first time ever, the mediator, he says, all athletes, please come up to the head staging area. There's 8 chairs at that point. He's in the middle there, and he's like, athlete number 1, please stand up. And it might be Hoist Gracie. And he'll say, this is Hoist Gracie. He stands this tall. He weighs this much. His martial art is this, or his fighting discipline is this, and whatever else. And then he goes, he sits down. Then contestant number 2. And then they run all down the line. After they've introduced the 8 participants, they pull out a bingo ball machine that has 8 names on the balls, and you spin it around a few times. You pull up ball number 2, it might be like Ken Shamrock, and then spin it again, it might be like a Mark Coleman, and you find out for the first time. First off, you just met the other 7 participants for the first time ever. And you now find out who your first opponent is going to be less than 24 hours before you're going to climb the cage. And I can't run to my cell phone and Google or ask Siri, who is this? Who's Don Frye? What's his fighting discipline? Are there any videotapes onto him? Today, all that's in place, but back then, none of that was in place. I mean, literally, it was the wild, wild west. And who better than Don Frye there? I mean, look at that. Where's your cowboy hat on there, Don? I mean, you got that cowboy hat. I mean, he is the original cowboy from that era there, because when you look at the fact that you don't know this, Seth, but he actually has a blacksmith background there as well, horses, things of that nature. So Don is a cowboy in a lot of different sense there. But he also was one of my wrestlers when I was coaching at Arizona State University, and he lived with a couple of my younger brothers. So I know Don much like a brother and the aspects there. So when people say, well, did you help Don Frye? I go, I only helped Don Frye get into the UFC. I go, Don Frye is the person that kicked that door wide open, and he made his own impression, and he's been in probably 3 or 4 of the most highlighted fighting matches for just crash, bang, boom. Yes, a lot of crash, bang, boom.
Jesus, those body shots have me sore.
Yeah, thank you.
So,
I hope they had my opponent sore today.
And when you just sit there, and when I was watching those, there's no muscle to cover those lower floating ribs. So with each one of those, I'm like, oh, there's a spleen, there's a liver. Oh my God, that guy must have been pissing blood for a month.
I hope so.
No get well cards were being handed out at that point. But again, Seth, the fun part about that would always be the tournament's over, and then there would always be the after fight party where you had to show up in order to get your check, at that point in time. So you always wondered, going to the after fight party, what kind of physical altercation is going to take place, because now they're drinking, there's no referees, there's no one to restrain you, so you just don't know how many altercations ever took place. Yeah. I never saw anything take place, but I'm sure it happened.
I didn't even know there was an after fight party. See, this is why you need to talk a little bit more. This stuff evaporates otherwise.
Well, they used to refer to it as a black tie affair. We used to refer to it as the black eye affair, because most everyone that showed up had a shiner or two. Yeah, shiner, a broken nose, whatever.
So there was
a big old bandage on the side of their head, cauliflower ear. Yeah, so it was. I don't even know if the UFC even does that anymore. That was all back during that no hold barred era.
I'm sure they do. I'm sure they sell tickets like Pride used to. Pride would sell tickets to it, for the fans come in and get their autographs, but they would still make more money off of not just the event, but the after party itself.
Yeah, I think actually both. When you look at the weigh-ins that take place again, they still do all the weigh-ins that to get the stage for the fans, and
it's money on top of money on top of money. Yeah.
Again, as a business,
I don't know about you, but hell, they didn't have weigh-ins when I was there. They didn't have a scale or anything. They just took your word for it. How much you weigh? How tall are you?
Well, I'm trying to think if again, I don't think the UFC even had a scale. I think you just stood. I think you just stood up there, just like you said. You stood up there, and they just basically just read off your credentials. So I mean, I could have said I weighed 150 pounds instead of weighing 265 pounds.
You haven't seen since you were 12 years old.
Dan, you said that you confused them when they asked what your fighting style was, and you said it was American wrestling.
Well, the the gal, when she was filling out the information for the announcer, when she read down on the list, she goes, "Well, what's your fight style?" I'd never been asked that question before. And I just paused for a moment there, and I'm like going, "I'm an American wrestler." Well, she had never heard that response, so she just kind of like looks left and right. Then she leans on in. She goes, "What exactly does that do?" And so I just kind of mimicked her. I go, look left and right, and I lean down in and go, "You might want to watch. I'm kind of making this up as I go, you know." And because I always tell people that I just never really got into any fisticuffs and brawls and things of that nature. I mean, it was, but international. I always tell people my international amateur wrestling background really helped me out a great deal in preparation for this, because wrestling inside the United States, it's nice, it's civilized, but when you're in a foreign country, on that foreign soil, you have that foreign opponent. There's a lot of countries that do not like the Americans. It's, again, all depends on what kind of propaganda their country is spewing about America, and vice versa. So it's our own country, the propaganda that our country keeps spewing all the time. So it's
against its own people.
Yes. Well, again, there's today's world right now. There's a lot of shit being slung around here. That's all I know. And people are no longer accountable for what comes out of their mouth. I mean, again, but we have Barack Obama to think about that one, because he's the one that no longer allows media to be accountable for what comes out. Prior to him giving the green light, I mean, if you said something slanderous or something like this, I mean, you were held liable. And that's a shame, because I mean, it's you could come up with complete lies right now and say things to where if people have never met you before, they might go, "Well, it's got to be true. This guy said it on the news network." And again, you got to look at, what are the ratings for CNN and CNN? What are their ratings, and what kind of a credibility do they have now, and versus other types of stations that are out there. I mean, it just, I wish people were back to that point where you had to say truthful statements, otherwise you were liable for what came out of your mouth. So,
or you had to say those statements to the individual, not by typing something on your phone and posting it in a faceless or nameless way, or where you're hundreds of miles away, or again, where you don't have to have that face-to-face conversation,
Yeah, I think Don refers to them as the keyboard warriors. Yes, they don't have no physicality at it, but you ought to see them on that cell phone with those double thumbs going there, or they're on that laptop going.
The emoji colors, yeah.
But see, Dan, you were sort of sharing some insight there about the bigger media, but if I relate it back to something I was talking about earlier, coming out of our induction weekend, and I would hear a complaint from somebody, or they would post something, or be a stupid little comment, or somebody would send me a message. They wanted to get into the most petty little things. I would, again, it's too easy for them to get in contact with you. Oh, it used to be, again, you had to schedule an appointment or go see someone physically, but now someone I barely know is sending me a direct message and expects for me to be answering them, or they'll send an email and want a rapid response. Meanwhile, what I realized, I can't focus my energy there. I need to focus on our mission. I need to focus on our goals. And if I'm spending 1 minute answering these people who have some petty complaint, then I'm not spending that energy focused on the objectives that I've set for ourselves. And that's what we need to be doing. And so, it's a mental test to be able to withstand that negativity. And Dan, I'm going to go back to the big family. I had 3 older brothers, and if they knew something bothered you, they were going to harangue you. And by the way,
really
now, what's the name, Dan, that your family tells you that gets you going crazy? Because
yeah. Oh yeah, no. Everyone knows in that family how to get your goat. You betcha.
So that for me was always the best training, because I realized, wait, the people who I care about know how to piss me off, but I don't care about these other people. So what do I care what their opinions are? And unfortunately, you don't they get pissed off, but you're not giving them any energy. You're not giving them any daylight. But I do still use that. I call it my tackling fuel from the water boy. You know, he always needed his tackling. That's my tackling fuel. So, you know, I like so keep talking shit. Keep saying negative things, because that's just going to drive me to keep kicking ass and to do it even better.
Well, again, that's you already know that if they're coming after you negatively, stuff like this, obviously you're already over on them in the first place. So they're just trying to take you down a few pegs. And to me, it's like going, you know, I don't let none of that stuff ever bother me. I try to always hang around associate with as many positive people as possible. Because I always say that you can brainwash yourself positive the same way that you can brainwash yourself negatively. Anyone that watches the news right now, there's nothing but this garbage after garbage after garbage that's on there. Even sometimes I get sometimes get tired of just hearing some of the positive stuff too much right there. But
well, Dan, let me shoehorn in our organization, the International Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame. All right, because you got to see it in person.
Yes.
We are there. I want to break it to people. We're actually not about pro wrestling. We're about helping people.
Thank you for watching another episode of Dan and Don's Toxic Masculinity. You better like, subscribe, and share, or I'm going to come to your house.